Hello and welcome to the GW Book Club, where I am joined by my good friend Stu from the Miniature Realms channel to chat about a classic 40k book this time. We're taking a look at Codex Imperial Guard from the second edition of Warhammer 40,000. Stu, are you a big fan of the Imperial Guard? Have you been a treadhead all this time?
Yes, actually, yes. I had an awful lot of the miniatures that appear in this book, though I didn't own the book at the time, but I had an awful lot of the miniatures. I enjoyed the Imperial Guard. I have to stop saying Astra Minotaur now because I'm painting them at the moment for 40k. I've just trained my brain to say Astra Minotaur, and now I've got to untrain it for the next half an hour or so to say Imperial Guard, which I much prefer. But I had the Road Trader Guardsman set, which I absolutely love that aesthetic and style. They're the original Cadians, I suppose. And then I moved into the metal, so I've been a fan of them for a long time. I've always liked humans in my games, and these were spot on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's always a great perspective for like the world. It's something to compare everything else to, isn't it? Like I always thought it was great when you get like an Imperial Guardsman and then you get the relative heights of everybody else compared to them. And that sort of gives you a good sense of, okay, this is how tall a Space Marine is. This is how short a Ratling is, or a Tau, whatever else might
Yes,
be out there
yes.
in the galaxy. So yeah, I mean, so this is a classic Codex books. One of the earliest ones is by Rick Priestley with Andy Chambers, Jervis Johnson, Ian Pickstock as well, contributed some stuff. It has, I mean, I guess if we start from the front cover, I think that this is a really iconic cover, right? So this is the
Yes.
Capchan Jungle Fighters by Dave Gallagher. Absolutely amazing, right? This speaks to a proper era of 40k, I think.
Yeah, 100%. They were the standout miniatures out of all of these metal ones, I think, that arrived at that time. The ones I remember being most excited about, and I don't know if it's because of films during that era. Obviously, there's the you look at that and you can see Aliens, Commando probably
Yeah.
as well, and Rambo with the
Oh,
red
a whole
things.
squad full of
It's all
Rambos,
it's
absolutely.
yeah, a whole
Predator
squad
as
of Rambos.
well.
Yep, yep. It's just there's a whole list of films that you see those, and there's no wonder they're the cover art. They know what they're doing at this point.
Yeah, yeah, completely. I mean, I think that it is a really cool, evocative image. It makes them look like awesome, right? The Imperial Guard
Yeah.
look nails, even though they're not always nails in game, which is they shouldn't be. This is a world full of Space Marines and Tyranids and all sorts, so they're not going to be like the top tier, but they look great. Like it gives a real sense of these are like macho action hero guys, which
Yes.
in a way you kind of would have to be. I actually think this is really interesting with the tone in this book because second edition is a little bit more heroic, I suppose I would say, right? So when it describes
Yeah.
the Imperium, it doesn't dwell on the darker side of things. It's still there, the scale and the scope of it and the innate suffering of this massive organization is there, but it sort of goes more for, in the Imperium, their armies are really strong and their fleet are really fast, and the Imperial Guard turn up and save the day. And someone might join the Imperial Guard and have to serve for 10 years in a unending war on the front, and then they get rewarded by invading a planet and taking over that planet. And it kind of positions them as like, oh, that's just what a heroic thing. It never talks about like how they're recruited and forced to fight these wars and how the absolute horror that would be war on the front line as a member of the Imperial Guard. It paints a much rosier sort of, I guess, a cinematic heroic picture most of the time, right?
Yeah, it's Starship Troopers, the movies
Sure.
version of human army, isn't it? It's glorious. Come and join us. At the same time, while you kind of can see between the lines what a
You can.
terrible lot they have, but yeah, the way it's presented is it's not grim dark at this point, is it? It's a real change in the whole aesthetics during this era, anyway. And it is the birth of modern 40k in the same way as the fourth edition was the birth of modern fantasy, though we can see the way the game progresses.
Mm.
It does become a bit more grim and dark again. It kind of recaptures that from Rogue Trader, but this period it was kind of it couldn't be more 1990s, could it?
Sure.
It's just early 1990s, and
Yeah.
everything about it is that kind of rock pop. It's
Yeah.
Europe. It's Bon Jovi. It's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what 40k was in this era.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of describing it. And I think actually the movie parallel is a really good one because yeah, earlier Rogue Trader has that sort of the darkness and the grittiness and the sort of there's kind of a countercultural sort of thing and a satirical element and it's kind of got like 70s sci-fi film feel
Yeah,
to a lot of it. By the time you get to second edition 40k, you are moving, like you say, it is Arnie movies and Stallone movies. There's a lot. It's a much there's still dark, these are still like, even in those movies, you're out there like killing guys, right? That's the whole point of those movies. So there is darkness, like innately part of it, but it's kind of done with like all the bulging muscles and like the glamour and the excitement and the thrill of the action. That's definitely a thread that runs through this book in particular and a lot of second edition generally. But in this book, there is this real sort of like, these are the heroes of the Imperium. Yeah, the Space Marines are heroes as well, but these are not like super powered individuals. These are just regular folk, but they're still out there being heroes and legends and like, doing all this sort of stuff. And I don't want to say there's no grimness and no darkness because that is absolutely here, and I'm sure we'll get into some of it. But just tonally, generally, it's a bit more like, check out these guys, they're cool.
flashy.
Yeah.
If Michael Bay had written Saving Private Ryan, it
Yeah.
would have been a different film. That's maybe what we're
Yeah.
maybe
Yes,
that's what
that's
we're
right.
into.
Yeah. But there's maybe a little bit more propaganda feel to some of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned the sort of the shift as well in terms of the original Rogue Trader Imperial Army, those, and then they
Yes.
became the Imperial Guard guys. There's some really interesting stuff here how you've evolved from what was the Imperial Army and the sort of that earliest iteration of Imperial Guard. These are talked about in Rogue Trader. They do exist. They have their army lists. Book of the Astronomicon's got an army list for them, and then White Dwarf published a sort of really interesting article about them that moves them closer to this. But in the Rogue Trader era, it's very much just like, okay, you get your regular tactical squads of guardsmen,
Hmm.
and they're all the same. They're just a uniform, very much like you say the Starship Troopers sort of look,
Yeah.
right? They have that look and that feel, and they're all exactly the same. This book does something really interesting, which is dwell on all of the distinct worlds that Imperial Guard come from and how that then sort of influences the squads. So you get these really vibrant, very characterful squads like the Catachans and the Valhallans and the Talons that give a real cool visual identity to the Imperial Guard.
Yeah, for sure. So I remember when these came out, and I was a bit surprised at first because suddenly the guard didn't look like my guard. That you got these metal. I think the Catachans were the first. It might be my memory. I've not
Right.
gone and checked any of this, but it felt like they were the first set to be released. And I was buying each of these sets as they came out, and that was my guard army. So he's got this weird kind of mix of different. It's like the A team of guard armies with all these different people from different planets, essentially.
Yeah.
But I was probably 13. I didn't really think of it like that. It was just cool miniatures, and I painted them tried to paint them like the box art. So they were, there was Catachans there, hot and sweaty next to the Valhallans and their thermals, but they were great ideas, I suppose, and they might regret it now because they created all of these wonderful starts for potential armies and never really followed through on the miniatures lines for
Mm.
any of them, really, apart from Catachan Plastics. The rest of them, I suppose you've got a version of the Cadians, haven't you? Which are kind of carrying over from the old plastic versions anyway. But
Yeah.
some of them, they didn't really progress past that box set of 10 miniatures and the little gun team.
Yeah. It's
It's
interesting.
a
Yeah.
shame.
Because it's such a good idea. And I think
Mm.
one of the things that I find really fascinating about this book in particular is how much it kind of, in a micro sense, on a smaller level with just one book, it kind of mirrors the development approach that Warhammer Fantasy went through. So when you look at they kind of have taken a look at real world cultures or history or like identities and kind of said, right, okay, how can we extrapolate from that into a faction? And in Warhammer Fantasy, that was like, okay, well, this will be an entire army, an entire faction, an entire part of the world. Here, they've just said, well, we can take that and turn that into one squad, and then we'll reverse engineer what their world is like. That is the
Yes.
reason they wear like Russian thermal jackets and Cossack helmets and whatever else. Like they'll come up with a story in order to justify those miniatures. And I think you also, like in Warhammer Fantasy, you see the Perry twins who sculpted a lot of these miniatures sort of being given an opportunity to like have some fun and go off and
Yeah.
find an army that they can do that speaks to them because they love historical miniatures. They like to make that kind of thing much more so than sci-fi or fantasy. And this is the perfect way to apply their talents. It's
And it's
great.
exactly what they did.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got this kind of weird mix of North Africa sort of going on there. You've got yeah. It's there's so many historical references, whether it's
Mm.
sort of Prussian, Franco-Prussian War, maybe for the Nemoidians, or maybe that's sort of Russians as well, sort of different kind of uniform, maybe First World War uniform. There's so many different things. I think something else they did was, I think it was trying to give you ideas, because quite early on in the book, and this is probably a reflection on the way the book's written, which is quite unusual. In the some of the other books, you get history, you get story, a definitive separate little story, and then you'll get bits that are sort of instructions for how the game plays or how you should write your list. And there's whole chunks of this that jumps about from one paragraph to the other, where it starts as written about history, and then it kind of blends into more of a bit of a story, and it tells a little bit of a story, and then there's another paragraph that says, and as players you can create whatever world you want, all within the same page.
Yeah.
And you don't see that too often, and we've done this a lot for the fourth edition fantasy books, and they're much more kind of, this is your history part, here's your breakout stories by Bill King, and then here are your rules. But there's elements of this book where it's kind of, he sort of blend, it works fine, but it's this neat blend between going to tell you about a bit of history writing, and then say, and as a player you can recreate this any way you want, paint them whatever color you want, and say what planet they come from, and then it blends into what is almost a bit of a mini story within the history section. So
Yeah.
I think it's trying to do lots. It almost feels like it's a lot of ideas, that if they planned it a little bit better, they might have reduced it a little bit and spent some more time producing a second unit for some of these ideas. Because maybe there were plans to bring out other units, so they had full ranges for each of these. But it seems like they did these, gave up, and went, what should we do then? Let's bring out the Vostroyans later on. We will do a slightly more fuller range for those guys. But it was,
I'd be very interested to know if there were like broader plans. Obviously, we know there were other different types of Imperial Guardsmen did turn up, and were released over the years, like second edition into third and beyond. But yeah, like you say, some of these units just never really expanded beyond what you get here. And whether that was literally just that's the buyers making that choice. Did consumers just go for Catachans and Cadians, or is that how it went down? I mean, I don't even think, I can't even remember if there were there metal Cadians. I'm gonna have to take a look at the heavy metal section. Did they do metal Cadians for this? They did. The shock troops, wasn't it? Of course, yeah, because they're kind of the GI, the sort of American GI looking guys, right?
yes,
Yeah. So maybe they were just the most
time. They were the most boring for me. I didn't. I did buy them all, but they were the ones I kind of thought, these are a little bit more boring than all the others.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised they got a redesign. Post 1997 Starship Troopers, they did redesign them. Maybe inspired by the outfits in that. I don't know. But yeah, we would lose over time. You lose your Mordians, you lose your Talons and your Valhallans, which I think is a real shame. I mean, I think Mordians. Is there a bit of like American dress uniforms to those?
Yeah, that as well. There's so many. I don't know what it's supposed to be. It looks very kind of West Point almost as well, sort of officer. Yeah, there's probably a definitive, yes, this is what we were aiming for.
Sure.
I can see some reference. It might depend how you paint them as well. I know what your mind is drawn to.
But yeah, I mean, do you have a favorite of any of these squads?
At the time, I really loved those metal Catachans. They were just my favorite out of all of those. I probably wouldn't. They're probably a little bit obvious now. I'd go for something else. The Talan guys are really really cool. And I think if I was going to pick a set of those to have to replicate God knows how many times to make a whole army from, I'd probably go for that as a theme. I think it gives you a little bit more scope to green stuff bits here and there and change them. The others are a little bit too cartoonesque, I think, for me now. But
Yeah,
what about
I mean,
yourself?
I used to love the Ice Warriors of Valhalla.
Mm,
I think there's so around this, when RTS games were about a little bit later in the 90s as well. I always loved the snow maps on RTS
yeah,
games, whether it was Command and Conquer or StarCraft or
yeah, yeah,
Warcraft, whatever. I, I don't know. I just really liked snow. I loved snow bases, and I just loved that whole thing. So I think the Valhallan sort of spoke to that for me. So I quite like that. Nowadays, yeah, I don't know. I do like them all, to be fair. I think they all got their charm. There's a certain something about the Rough Riders that I think is really cool because they're
hmm
just so like archaic and bizarre to have just like cavalry in 40k, like traditional
yeah.
horse cavalry. I think is really fun. Although thinking about it, you know what? Actually, in terms of the ranges, I think the Ogrins might be my favorite. I think the
Ah,
metal Ogrins at
yeah.
the time were amazing. I love them.
Some of those are older, aren't they? Some of those date back. I think that's why
Yeah,
my
they may
brain
well do,
immediately
but
discounted them. Then I
I think they
think they date
they
back
did
to
a
Road
new
Trader.
range of Ogrins for this. I think because the
Oh,
older
okay.
ones, like the old sort of Bob Ollie Ogrins that were around prior to this, are slightly different, and there were other Ogrins as well. I'm not sure. I think that these might have been updated because these are by Michael Perry. So yeah, I think they could have updated.
Okay.
At least some of these might be new for this codex or around this time.
I definitely had some of them, and I really just again, it's a very long time ago, and I was very young, so my brain remembers owning them. I think before I owned some of the others, but I'm probably wrong. I was thinking purely in terms of the guard regiments themselves. If I could just choose miniatures, it'd be the Rattling Snipers. They're
Yeah,
incredible. I noticed that they're green with red cuffs there as well. So they're like riflemen. So not 95th because they've had black cuffs. But I'm assuming that that's what they were going for was the rifleman type of look there, which is brilliant.
yeah, they're great miniatures. I love that they've retained the Ogrins and the Rattlings for this. So the previous
Mm,
armies for the Imperial Guard, for the Imperial Army, had the abhumans in them. But they had included obviously your Beastmen as well. Back when they were Imperial Beastmen, they dropped that, and I'd be interested to know why they decided to drop that because I personally think that's very cool, and I love the fact that we get 40k Beastmen now. They're back. I think that's very
yeah,
cool. But yeah, they decided to get rid of the Beastmen, maybe just make them pure chaos to reflect Warhammer Fantasy, which had done that as well. And then you just keep Rattlings and Ogrins. There's no squats here either. So, but the way they bake that into the actual narrative of the Imperial Guard, I think is great. Like having them as key parts of Imperial Guard. They turn up, they're accepted, they're just, they do what they do. It's really nice from an army list design because obviously it allows you to have these different profiles and different unit types that have specific battlefield functions, but they're also in the lore, an extra complexion, a bit of texture to this whole thing, which I think is really good.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I forgot about the Beastmen being
Mm.
removed. It's probably just that kind of do not suffer the mutant kind of thing, and that Rattlings and Ogrins are the only sort of accepted abhumans. I
Yeah,
think that was the route they went down, and it was Beastmen obviously just look a little bit too chaotic. Just realizing as well, I know this, but that the Lehman Russ, how old that kit is, and it's not changed, does it? This is still
yeah.
it's still like just insane, really, how
Great
well
looking
that
tank though.
kit has lasted. And the modern day heresy ones are just smartened up, crisped up versions of these as well, because the design's just so good.
Yeah, I mean you'll know better
It's
than I do.
insane.
Do these reflect any real tank? Like, is there any like real vehicle
There's
here?
little, yeah, there's little nods to so many different tanks. I think the latest 11th edition Astra Militarum troop carriers and stuff are a little bit more obvious, but the way the tracks are done on the Lehman Russes is very sort of First World War, but the turrets are much more Second World War. So they're nice sort of amalgamations of the two. And again, the Chimera, that's the same kit again. That's still the Chimera now, isn't it? Someone's going to tell us in the comments if I'm wrong, and there was an update somewhere in that period where I wasn't wargaming, but as far as I'm aware, those are the
I can believe that there's been an update,
kits.
but they've kept it pretty
They might
close.
have retooled it. They might have retooled it, but
yeah, the designs are so
changed too
iconic.
much.
They're great. Obviously, the Lehman Russ is kind of snub nosed, right? It's quite
Yes.
short, but it has a certain like it's almost, I don't want to say cartoony or comical. It works really well on the table. They look great, but like
Yes.
if you were to actually like the actual proportions of it are just completely bizarre in real life.
It's because the guns are bigger than they would be. So if we are making those comparisons with historical, especially World War II tanks, which is probably the best comparison for them, have a look at World War II weapons and the size of the barrels compared to these, and that's what's weird. That's what's so oversized. The turret, to a certain extent, as well. They're just so oversized compared to the rest of it. That's what makes them look slightly comical. Whereas you look at the newer stuff like the Rogel Dawn, which is the new style and the same kind of style of tank. That's much more in proportion for a real tank would be. But yeah, it's great to see them still being current almost. I love all of the alternative color schemes and stuff that are in this book. There's so much in the heavy metal pages. It's really busy. There's loads of different options, and the options about how to organize them into squadrons and the liveries and the badges and numbers and things that you should use is really, really good as well. And again, it's all taken from Second World War colorings and styles. It's not doesn't match, but it's so your little colors at the front of the tanks on the sides. That's a British sort of thing from the Second World War. They'd have white and red most of the time. I think the colors change a little bit on these, and then you've got your regimental organization guides when you've got your platoons, and you've got that split circle. So some of them are black and blue, some of them are red and blue, some of them are that kind of coloration, that style of squadron and platoon is very similar to World War II tanks and stuff as well. So you can see whether they've taken all of that real stuff and brought it into the fantasy world. And I think when you can do that, that's what gives it so much depth and makes it really, really interesting. That's what made Warhammer so interesting, is that so much history was put into the old world, and I think it really works when they've taken so much history and put it into the Imperial Guard as it was then, and it just makes it believable.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. I think actually
with their bright red guns.
But I think leaning into that is really strong, like that Second World War vibe for the Imperial Guard, because it also evokes, it is a terrible war and the horrible experiences. This is where the grim and the dark is absolutely part of this. Is that you're basically saying, well, yeah, it's that the great, this enormous war that we fought just between countries. Extrapolate that out between whole worlds and like a million of them. This is that, but on a scale that is inconceivable. So you really do get that. That's a real grimness to like saying it's the Second World War in space, basically.
Yes, certainly is.
Yeah, but you've got loads of like all of the tanks. I think could be taken as just your like troop types, or what would be the equivalent to your I forget what it is, a battle line, I think. So like you can have your squads, and this is obviously gives rise to your sort of Imperial Guard being your tank based armies, which is fantastic. Again, another point of difference to a lot of other forces at this time. And I think it would be really interesting to take a look at how like plastic technology had evolved by this time in Games Workshop's history, because an army like this would only have been possible where you're taking tanks as like troop choices.
Yeah.
So that you've got a whole range of a load of different tanks with loads of different options, and you can have loads of them in the force, because actually plastics technology has now advanced so far in the last like 5-10 years that we can offer that range to people at a reasonable price. You know, we're way beyond. Obviously, there were tanks in the early Rogue Trader days with your Rhino and with your Land Raider, but like the Land Raider and the Rhino were it. You couldn't. That's why Eldar and the Imperial Guard and the Space Marines and Orcs, everybody's riding round in stolen Land Raiders. During this period, there's other vehicles as well, but like they are available to everybody because you've only got a couple of big plastic kits available. So you want as many armies, as many players to have access to them as possible. By the time we get to this, it's like, oh, well, we're going to do a specialist battle tank like this, and another tank like this, and another tank like that. It's awesome. It's like the technology has enabled the creation of this army, and then it gives you a load of different new options. It's fascinating, I think, to explore some of that.
Yeah, you can really see that. And so when I was collecting those metal miniatures, I don't think all of these tanks were out there. It was prior to this Codex coming out, I think. So again, someone's going to tell me I'm wrong and it came out in a different order, but my memory of it was that they were releasing those metal sets over a course of a few months, and I'd bought them and painted them. But I definitely didn't own any of the tanks at the time, and I didn't own this Codex at the time, so I kind of missed that jump on to it for whatever reason. But the Chimera and the Lehman Russ there have just opened up a world to something else, and I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. What do you think about the special characters that are included here as well? So they've got some like historical special characters and some contemporary special characters.
Yeah, so you've got Yarrick there, and I definitely had that miniature. I remember that that time. You got Macarius as well, I think, which I think he's in this. So I'm not dreaming that, am I?
No, he is in.
So
he is in this.
Scrolling through now. I mean, I find he's a really interesting character.
He's great.
I recently started and paused, but started reading the novel, the Bill King Macarius.
I really want. It's like a trilogy, right?
Yeah, I've got it. I bought it all on in digital. So with the short stories, a couple of short stories leading to it, I'm really enjoying it. I'm unsurprised by that because I love Bill King's writing. But it's good. I'm enjoying it so far, but I've not really got into the meat of it. Because
that tells the story of the actual crusade itself, right? So going out and reconquering all of these worlds.
It's not through his so far, and I don't think it changes. It's not through his perspective. It's from the perspective of someone who ends up serving very close to him. But I haven't got that far yet.
Right.
I need to get back to reading it. I was reading it, and then I started listening to an Astra Militarum audiobook at the same time, and it was too much. They were too close together. Sure. So I'm going to wait till I finish the audiobook, and then I'll return to it. Otherwise, I'll be confusing myself too much. But do you have a favorite special character that's in the book?
Yeah, I mean, this sort of ties into, we like to take a look at some of the art in these books and talk about our favorite pieces of art. And I really like the artwork for Mogul Khmer. I think that is such a cool piece of artwork. So he's one of the Rough Riders, and it looks amazing. He looks so interesting to me. I actually don't know. Did they do a miniature of this character? I
don't think so.
Don't remember.
I don't think so at all.
So, but I think he looks awesome, and like he's barely got any story whatsoever, sadly. But I just think there's something really cool about it. It's quite an interesting look, and I like the Rough Riders as just a set of miniatures. So I don't know, that kind of appeals to me. It's hard not to say, like, Yarrick is pretty great, right? He's lived way beyond his early introduction, shortly, relatively before this book, and sort of codified here in more detail. So Yarrick is great, but yeah, I think Macarius is great. I think that there's some really cool stuff here. One thing I will note as well is that Stumper Muckstart, which is a fantastic name for a rattling sharpshooter, the piece of art for him, which is great, but that piece of art appears in this book like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah,
and there's loads of amazing art in this book. I'm just really surprised that they were like, well, we've got to make sure that Stumper turns up on every few pages.
Yeah,
He's great though.
there's a couple of little oddities like that. It's a really good bit of artwork, but yeah, there's definitely some odd bits like that. And then you've got obviously Colonel Schaefer doesn't have any art at this stage, but he was someone that stuck around for a bit longer and had a
Sure.
miniature.
Yeah.
So you can see at this stage that they must have had ideas that really changed by the time the third edition came along and the game moved forward. 'Cause, did Chenkov have miniature? I don't remember if he did or not either. If he did, it didn't look like that. Didn't look
Yeah.
like the artwork. I know Al Rahim did. I'm pretty sure he did. And am I dreaming that?
I don't.
I can.
I might be mistaken here. I don't remember Nork Deadog, the Ogren bodyguard. Did he have a
I
miniature?
mean, he's still around. He does now.
Right.
So he's still around. He's still around now. Not necessarily brilliant miniature in my opinion, but yeah, he has one now. He's still around in the current version of the rules. He has rules. So I don't know if he did back then.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, that could be. Yeah, could totally have forgotten. Could totally have missed it. But I think it's really interesting how that obviously was happened a lot more in this era. So, like, even the basilisk is here. There's a vehicle
Mm,
card for it, and there's rules for it. Vehicle cards, by the way, amazing. I miss them,
yes.
and I miss like the way you did penetrating hits and glancing hits and
Yeah, that was
all
good
your
fun.
damage tables. Really fun. I know it's a lot of extra faff, but I think it was very cool and themey. I liked it. But yeah, the basilisk didn't exist. There wasn't a miniature for it at this time. So it's in here. It's got rules, but all the other vehicle cards have got pictures on, and then that's just text.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few odd ones. Just
Mm.
flicking through the miniatures pages at the back, just in case it answered our question. But it that clearly doesn't. None of the missing miniatures there are there. Yeah, there's a Desert Raider Lieutenant, so maybe he was the miniature I was thinking of. Maybe they didn't do Al Rahim one, which
Did you
is a
have a
shame.
favorite piece of art from this then?
I There's an obvious one which is page 5. It's one of the few full page pieces of
Uh,
artwork.
yeah.
I'm also a fan. It's very small in this book. It's actually bigger in the miniatures pages at the back, but on page 31, which is in the Macarius section, there's a bit of lore around Macarius. There's a bit of a sort of battle scene where in the foreground is. I don't know if it is a Baneblade. Actually, the barrel looks quite small, so it might be a Stormlord, but it's the Baneblade chassis in the foreground, and then there's a few other super heavies around it, and I love the really big battle scene vistas. Always do, and they look
Sure.
really really amazing when they're done, especially when it's black and white art like that. It's just really cool.
Yeah, very cool, isn't it? Because you've got a real depth of field in there as well. You're seeing right the way along the battlefield, and that's very World War II looking like bit of
Yeah,
artwork.
anything like that, or that looks slightly reminiscent of Napoleonic stuff. So it's not in this book, but the cover art that's used on the old Imperial Guard box set when you got the spiders, is it the
Yeah, the
Necromunda
Necromunda
spiders?
spiders. Yeah.
And just that, one of my favorite ever pieces of artwork, full stop, on for 40k. Just love it, absolutely love
Yeah.
it.
That's a magnificent piece. Yeah, it's a shame it's not in here, but then I guess it's slightly different feel to where this book has gone. Obviously, you could absolutely have like Napoleonic style of
Mm,
a world if you wanted to create it very easily. You could get hold of that and sort of fashion something like that up. Um, I do quite like as well the Lehman Russ piece of art with the guns firing in different directions on
yeah.
page 29, and you've got the captain sticking out the top, shooting his gun as well.
Yes.
It's very, very
Yes.
cool.
But
Yeah,
definitely less of the kind of the big full page
sure.
showstoppers in this, and I guess that's because there's so much in it. It's packed full of different stuff. There's the kind of the tactics explanation a bit later on about playing all tank armies of Blitzkrieg.
Mm.
There's quite a lot of miniatures pages at the back for advertising. There's, like we've already mentioned, loads of the heavy metal pages. So it's almost like there isn't time for putting whole double pages of maps and double page. Well, there is a map as well, actually, isn't there? The
There
galactic
is,
map,
yeah,
but
yeah.
double. The big pieces of art that we've seen in the fourth edition of fantasy books quite as much.
Yeah.
But there's lots of little bits of art throughout. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, a lot more sort of vignettes, little sort of images of the
Yes.
different squads, basically. And you like an isolated character or a couple of characters. I think again, it does work really well to sort of give that feel of those different squads and kind of give that picture of it. Um, but overall, I mean, I think that it's a great book to revisit and to read through. Obviously, a very different era of 40k, a very different era of Imperial Guard compared to where we are now. Not least in the name, but just in the sort of feel of this army is completely different. I'm looking back now and sort of surprised that I didn't love the Imperial Guard more back in the day than I did, if that makes sense. So one of the things
Yeah,
when Tau came out, for instance, I fell in love with Tau instantly. I just really loved them. And one of the reasons why was because I'm a big fan of that kind of like the sort of cobbled together army. So even though they might, a Tau force, for example, being like they're all very slick and polished, but you can have, okay, we've got some Kroot in there as well, and we've got some Vespids, and we've recruited these guys, and you get the different sort of feel to it where you have like a coalition in your army.
yeah,
I quite like that. Different sized troops and different like natured troops is a big thing for me. I'm a big fan of that. And the Imperial Guard Codex is like built around that. Not just with you have humans and ratlings and ogrins and tanks, but also within the humans, there's all of these different feeling units that you bring together. So the army looks cohesive because every part of it looks different, if that makes sense.
yeah. I'm with you.
And so I feel like I really missed a trick. Young Jordan totally missed a trick on Imperial Guard. I don't know why I was more into them at the time.
I think I was always into sort of military type stuff. That was already a big pull factor for me anyway. So it kind of felt pretty obvious. And then especially with the covers like that and the films I was watching at that time, it hooked me in very easily.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. Like, I think where Imperial Guard have ended up now is quite interesting. I think I maybe, and this is probably just my general nostalgia. I think I yearn for the second edition or earlier editions of pretty much every army when I think about it. But for Imperial Guard, it feels like there's a lot of stuff on the table that's been left on the table, I guess. There's loads of cool stuff here that you absolutely could bring back and really do
Mm.
something very cool with. And I hope that they do, basically. That's, yeah. Not that there's not cool stuff right now, there absolutely is. But it feels like there's a load of cool stuff here that you could go, you know what? What's the modern version of this like?
Yeah, I think they've started to do it over the last few years. We had the old Acadians, and we were stuck in Cadia, and to a certain extent we are now. But they brought back more the later versions of stuff. So your Krieg, because it was Forge World and it was expensive, and
Mm.
the new versions of that are fantastic. The new Cadians, I think, are really nice. They're scaled really well. They're surprisingly small, so they actually look tiny next to Marines, which is the thing we never quite got right in this area. Everyone was the same height, regardless of what it was. And a lot of the units that you see here are all still in the game, or there's modern versions from it, and it's expanded. So I could take my modern collection and play a game of second edition, no problem, because there's enough stuff that would, count as the things that it should be. Some of it is exactly the same. They need to do catechans again. They definitely need to update them. I much prefer the metal ones than the plastics. That came a little bit later on.
Yeah.
They just went a bit too crazy.
Yeah, they didn't
But
quite.
again, when they redo those, which they've got to, I mean, this is going off on a tangent here, but they announced at the reveals for Armageddon that they were working on Steel Legion. They
Sure.
teased, and yeah, I can understand that, but surely if you were going to do that, you would bring it out with an Armageddon release.
Sure.
If you've missed that release, why bring out another gas mask style
Mm.
guardsman when you could do Catachans or any of the others that don't look too much like Krieg? Don't get me wrong, I will buy Steel Legion when they come out, because I want them as well, but it feels very same. So if you're looking at it from the cold hard business perspective, why wouldn't you return to Catachan now? You'd feel
Yeah.
that would what people would probably want. I don't know, speaking for other people, but
Well, but then, for all we know, you could get that very cool second edition style. This month it's Steel Legion. The next month it's Catachans. The month after, Emperor willing, it is Valhallans. and so on. That would be great to see. Even if it's just a handful of miniatures for each, it would be fantastic to see some of these
Mm,
guys come back.
yeah, hopefully. That'd be cool. There's too many armies to paint then, because I want to do them all, and they all have to
Yeah, I
be
mean that's
separate themes, so it'd
always going to be
be
the
a bit
problem,
crazy.
isn't it? Is there anything else, Stu, from this book that you would dwell on for a minute before we go?
No, I think we've kind of covered it really. I think overall in this era, you've got the color bits are so 1990s.
Yeah,
But if you like the grimmer, darker stuff, there it's still there. As soon as you get to the black and white pages, all of that artwork that you liked before, all of the Blanche type stuff is still there, and you can still have that grim, dark feel. We weren't talking quite about this, but we mentioned before we started recording about that you can make these games what you want them to be. You can have your own head canon for these games sometimes, and if you can still take the book of this era and play it very much in a grim dark way and paint it in a certain way, and it completely changes the way it looks. It doesn't have to look like the bright Rambo style cover. I think there's a lot more flex within the book once you start reading it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a very valid point. I mean, I would say yes, the coloured pages, the heavy metal pages, they look very 1990s, and I would add complimentary in black brackets after that because I think that's a cool thing. That's very good.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're right. You don't have to play this with that heroic edge if you don't want to, because within the foundations of this, and I guess this is great writing overall, really, they've made it more accessible in this book and they've sort of softened a lot of the edges. If you want to just focus on the heroics and, like, yeah, these guys must have volunteered and gone out to defend their space empire, then you can absolutely have that. But then you can also like read the Macaria story and get like he put all of his men through absolute hell and suffering, basically out of ego, to take them to the edge of the universe. And he just wanted
yeah,
to keep going because he's, the Alexander the Great of space. Like that's a fantastic story. And that speaks to the super grim dark elements of it. And he
certainly
wept
does.
for his men wouldn't follow him to conquer more worlds, basically. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's all there. You can absolutely play with that later feel and that later aesthetic, or the earlier feel and aesthetic, or you can
yeah,
just enjoy the Goblin Green bases if you want.
and just do a complete mix like I did, which is bizarre. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic era, and I think these books are so fun to revisit. I think that there is great writing here. There's fantastic world building. Some of these pages where like you say, you're jumping from story to rules to like play guides to all this sort of stuff. Some of these pages, they have just thrown 1,000 ideas into like 3 or 4 paragraphs, and they'll just be
yeah,
name dropping like world building elements, brand new stuff that's never been mentioned anywhere else, tying back to other stuff that pre existed and was from earlier versions, and just knitting it all together. And I think it's just such a good way of writing, and it's something that the Warhammer writers and Rick Priestley in particular have always done really
mhm,
well. Is just pepper everything with all of these cool concepts and names. They don't explain most of them, and your imagination just runs wild with it. You're like, "What's that? That sounds amazing. I want to find out more about it. I want to know about that weird planet they went to and fought this bizarre alien." There'll probably never be any more information about, but it just like plants the seed of excitement and like, oh, I want to fight that battle. I want to play in this universe. That's why I think that these editions, these Codex books do really well, and this is a great example of it.
Formation. I mean, to add to that, actually, as we were just coming to a close, nice and neatly there, the Talon story is really quite long and detailed in
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Considering we got what 10 squad of 10 and a
sure.
lieutenant and a gun team. The story and the lore for Talon is what we have today for the heresy side of it. That tells you quite a lot about the prehistory of that, why the planet was the way it was. Well,
Mm.
that's kind of the story we have in the heresy stories today within the novels for it as well. Reading that over the last couple of weeks. So I thought, well, I know this because I've heard this story retold 40 years later by different authors. So that little, couple of thousand words or 1,000 words, or whatever he wrote for those sections, has lived on and is part of the lore very much today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I bet there's a lot of stuff that has changed. Like I think if you did a forensic examination of the lore
Mm,
here, there'll be loads of names and dates and places that have shifted and moved and been removed. But there's a lot of stuff here that is like that's bedrock. That is the
yeah,
foundational work that later writers or even the same writers revisiting have then spun out into all kinds of fascinating stuff. So yeah, I think it's a great example of just really cool 40K writing. It is very much it has all of the fingerprints of this particular era of Games Workshop, with the color schemes and with the way of writing and the way of storytelling. But it is really neat. It's just really well done.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we've got a couple of other Codex books and Warhammer Army books that we are excited to revisit. We're going to be delving into some more of them, and I'm sure they'll have, maybe the conclusion would be exactly the same on some of those books because they're all so much fun. But yeah, very much looking forward to checking out a couple of other factions and seeing what else we can dig up from these older books. But for now, Stu, thank you very much for joining me. Where can
Pleasure.
people find you online?
Miniature Realms, YouTube first, and lots of supporting social media network stuff as well. But Miniature Realms, yeah.
Fantastic. And I'm Jordan Sorcery everywhere if you want to check out my stuff. And yeah, the GW Book Club, it will be back in the future, and we're going to take a look at some more of this kind of stuff. And we're quite excited to do so. So join us then. Thanks for watching.